when people say the DSL role, what do they usually mean? And what might they often underestimate? Yeah.
Obviously, it looks different in schools, but fundamentally, if you're the designated safeguarding lead, the responsibility stops with you. Yes, you may well have obviously a head teacher that you're passing on to, but you are the person that holds all of the pertinent information, and you're the person whose responsibility is to share, escalate, um, manage risk. And it's a giant job in risk management, and it's a job where you your instinct, right? This is the bit I find really hard. So your instinct, you're a teacher, you're in a school, or you work in education. You're there because you want children to be happy and safe, right? And your instinct is that every child should be happy and safe and not exposed to any form of harm in any capacity. That's unrealistic. And to be the DSL that makes the calls around what level of risk is acceptable is heartbreaking. To prioritize and to make that judgment is so significant. To decide, this child's been on a plan before, we're seeing this from home, but actually the plan was closed and we are willing to accept that, parenting isn't, all of it's so counter to your instinct, which is that every child should be in a safe, happy, loving home, the end. And that that's what it means being the DSL, and that's underestimated. You've got to be a really certain type of person to be okay with that.
You do lean hard into practical tools rather than another policy handbook. That's really, really clear. And like, are there any use tomorrow routines and resources you think every DSL should have?
I think that triangulation is really important. I think that it can fall by the wayside. I think that protected, directed triangulation time to look at all information available about a student before making a decision, and pattern spotting is something that often falls down because the DSL is being so reactive to current issues. And that's where those families or children that have previously had involvement or had a level of protection they no longer have start to slide off. And that's where things are missed. And we all know early intervention is absolutely the key. The other, I guess, another tip would be to spend time listening to children about what's going on culturally in the community. And again, to be a step ahead of it, you can nip in the bud something that could be a safeguarding issue for 20 kids if you stop it at one. If there's a trend, if there's a local thing, and that's where the having connections with the local police and the NHS really comes in handy, because for me at secondary, teenagers will always do daft stuff, like the nature of being a teenager, and that's why they're so fun. Like, they will always do silly stuff. They'll always make choices that make you go, oh, and they will always push boundaries. And I said, that's why we love them and that's why we work with them. But being a step ahead of those things and being able to educate them is more powerful than picking up after they've done it. So yeah, listening to the children, making really key time for triangulation, and then talk a lot about record keeping, like using your record keeping as a live experience, not as something you do after the fact, because so much is drawn from the evidence that you collect. You aren't, at the end of the day, you often aren't the decision maker. What you are is somebody that presents a wealth of knowledge and information about a child's situation. And so the benefit of doing it live as you go and it being a key part of how you work stops that end of the day, oh my god, now I've got 3 hours of, you need to take the time in between the things you're dealing with to document them as you go, rather than saving it up in a notebook and then spending 4 hours on
I
CPOMs.
mean, one of the things that's really interesting to me was that the emergence of almost like the less discussed risks within your book, and things
Mm-hmm.
like radicalization and incel culture, which I don't think we deal with much in primary, but it's on the safeguard and training anyway, kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And almost like affluent neglect, which is something I've seen a bit of in sort of Kent and Medway, but not as much as other forms of neglect. And I mean, is there a way that, or should a DSL decide their priorities without almost chasing headlines and going after the things that are in the sort of news more
So I
often?
think that's where it comes to the bit about knowing your community and your context, because it is so context specific, and all of those things you just mentioned fall under contextualized safeguarding. We are all now very fully aware that there used to be a model where safeguarding was the primary concern was in the home, right? Little kid goes home, are they safe? And we know that that's not the world that children inhabit nowadays, that safeguarding is something that risk is everywhere, right? Beyond the home, online, as much as it is from a family member, as much as it is from a local youth group. It's also in TikTok, it's also in Snapchat, all of those things. And I think that's why those relationships are really important, because your community will lean towards certain prevalences. There are certain determiners that make people more at risk for those type of things we've just talked about.